أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ونادى أصحاب الأعراف رجالا يعرفونهم بسيماهم قالوا ما أغنى عنكم جمعكم وما كنتم تستكبرون صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. I bear witness that there is no other God but Allah, and I bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final messenger of Allah, after whom no prophet old or new will come. And I begin in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. A verse from chapter 7 of the Quran I have recited is one that is pondered on, is thought about by many people, and sometimes they may find it a bit difficult to comprehend, to understand. It speaks of the Ashabul Araf, and the name of this chapter 7 is Al-Araf. It is normally translated as an elevated place. But the reference here is not so much to a location, but to a position. And so I interpret this verse as follows. The associates of deep thinking, when they speak out to persons whom they identify by their characteristics, they say, everything that you gathered, everything that you accumulated has brought no benefit to you, not even your swell-headedness. In this chapter, it begins with the common expression that we find in several chapters, certain abbreviated letters. And in this particular case, the chapter begins with Alif, Lam, Mim, Sod. Alif, Lam, Mim are letters which I use at the beginning of chapter 2, and I have interpreted these to mean that they apply to the 3 stages of the development of the soul. That is the Nafs al-Ammara, the soul in its initial stage, unbridled, untrained, unchecked. It can go into any direction of good or bad. And then the Nafs al-Lawwama, which means the soul that undergoes training. It is trained in good or bad. It is schooled. It is influenced in a particular way, depending upon knowledge and depending upon the environment and depending upon influence of teachers, gurus, gang leaders, whoever it may be, parents or elders, as the case may be. And Mim stands for Nafs al-Mutmainna. When a person becomes perfectly still and in what they are doing, it is usually applied to wrong, but to good. The person who is now perfected and their life is one in which they are constantly doing that which is right, which they are now morally and spiritually developed. But the other way is correct too, where a person who becomes mutmain, they become self-satisfied in their evil and their wrongdoing. Very difficult to change, as the Quran says. But here we had the word with the letter Sod, which is added to these. In another case, we had Alif Lam Ra, and we have explained that already as one of the stages of moral and spiritual development called Radya. Here the word is Sod. When these letters are interpreted as attributes of Allah, and that is also another interpretation, and you will find it in the translation of Maulana Muhammad Ali. In this case, Alif Lam Mim translated as usual, I, Allah, am the best knower, and sword, he has interpreted as Sadiq, that is, Allah is the truthful one. And that translation is perfectly correct, perfectly permissible. But if you apply this also, not only to Allah, but the process of human moral and spiritual development, then Sod stands here for Siddiq. And this is a very important word which is mentioned in the Quran. Because Siddiq are those who never lie, and their deeds confirm their belief and their speech. They don't only speak, they only preach, they act on what they preach and what they say. If one studies the Quran, one will notice that this state of moral, of spiritual development that is called Siddiq is just below the rank of a prophet. The best example that is given of Siddiq is in the case of the follower of the Prophet Muhammad, Abu Bakr. He was one of the foremost companions. Now it is important to note that Abu Bakr was the first successor to the Prophet Muhammad, the first Khalifa. And the Muslim world became divided on this issue because there are some people who believe that his son-in-law Ali should have been the successor. And that has caused a split in the Muslim community between what is known as Shia and Sunni. That the Shias uphold that Ali should have been the successor, and the Sunnis say Abu Bakr was the one who was rightfully selected. Some time ago, one section of the Shia, the Ismailis, known as the Aga Khanis, or sometimes Jafaris, or Itna Ashariyas, the Twelvers, they have come to the conclusion and acceptance of Abu Bakr as the Khalifa, as the successor of the Prophet Muhammad. Because Shias tend to curse and abuse Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman, and they ignore these three Khalifas and they accept Ali as the rightful successor to the Prophet Muhammad. But they have come, the Ismailis have come to accept Abu Bakr as the Khalifa, but they say that his successorship was agreed upon, but that's a political point of view. The real religious and spiritual successor to the Prophet Muhammad is in Ali. Now, Ali is a very important personality, and no doubt he and his descendants have contributed a lot, perhaps even more than the Sunnis, in giving us knowledge of the Quran and understanding. In fact, the four Sunni Imams of Abu Hanifa, Abu Malik, Ibn Hanbal, and Shafi have all in some way benefited from Shia ideas and thoughts. Because Abu Bakr and Imam Malik were students of Imam Jafar Sadiq, one of the foremost scholars of the Shia school. And of course, Ibn Abu Hanbal and Imam Hanbal and Shafi were students of these others. But leaving that aside, Abu Bakr plays a very important role in Islam so far as moral and spiritual development is concerned. So much so that he's referred to in the Quran. And he's called As-Siddiq because he was such a truthful one. Some people say that that truthfulness was because when the Prophet Muhammad had his Isra and Miraj, someone met Abu Bakr on the road and told him, look, your companion, your Prophet has claimed that he went to heaven and came back. And Abu Bakr, who had not heard the story, didn't know, he just said, did he say that? And they said, yes. He said, well, if he said it, I accept whatever he says. Meaning that even though I didn't see him or hear him, anything he says, I believe him. Because he's the Prophet of God and he would not lie. He was also known as Al-Amin before he became a prophet anyway. But Abu Bakr had that implicit and explicit faith in the Prophet Muhammad that he would never tell a lie. But Abu Bakr was such a truthful person that he was skillful in his ideas, in the way in which he'll present his ideas. And there's a very famous incident in which he was accompanying the Prophet when they were fleeing from Mecca to Medina. And they came across, of course, they were in disguise because they were, the Meccans were pursuing them. They had hid in the cave of Saur, and they said that because of the spider's web, they said, we cannot, they are not inside here, and they left. But when the Prophet Muhammad and Abu Bakr left after some time, on the way, they met a person who knew Abu Bakr. And he stopped him and he asked him, he said, who is that traveling with you? And he said, he is my guide. Now, the person, well, of course, he didn't want to disclose that was the Prophet Muhammad. That is called in Islam, Tawriyah. That is to say, give an expression which is true, but it does not really convey all what you intend to convey. And what Abu Bakr really meant was that the Prophet was a spiritual guide. This is my guide to Allah as a Prophet of God. But the person to whom you are speaking interpreted to mean this is my guide in the desert. So he was not telling a lie, but he was utilizing an expression in which he would give deep thought as to what he is saying and be careful so that he does not disclose the fact that they were fleeing and give that person was going to Makkah and would give them indication that these were the two persons that you were looking for. So that concept of truthfulness was something which was so much part of the personality and character of Abu Bakr that he is described in the Quran. The Quran says, you did not help him, but Allah helped him when he was the second of the two. Now, reference here to help is to the Prophet Muhammad. Allah helped the Prophet Muhammad. And then it says he is of the second of the two. But the Prophet Muhammad is second to none. He cannot be considered second to Abu Bakr. At the same time, the reference is to the Prophet Muhammad. If you have two people, how do you know which is first and which is second? What the Quran is pointing out to us, therefore, is the second of the two means that they are so much alike, even though they are different. It's like our two hands. They are different, but when you put them together, they become as one. So the Quran likens the closeness of Abu Bakr to the Prophet Muhammad as if they are together, and they are just two people, but either one could be the first, either one could be the second. But of course we know in the case of the Prophet Muhammad, he was the first. And Abu Bakr is the second of the two, although the Quran says that kind of comparison is made. But the word Siddiq is also used with regards to women. The mother of Jesus is called Siddiqa, which is the feminine of Siddiq. And it is very significant that when we compare this word with these two personalities, Abu Bakr is called Siddiq because of his closeness to the Prophet Muhammad, as if he is one with the Prophet Muhammad. And Mary is called Siddiqa, and the Quran says in chapter 66, verse 12, that Mary became is an example to the believers. She's an example. And then we breathed into her, we breathed into him. It does not say her, it says him in the Quran. We breathe into him, our spirit, and now that breathing into him means breathing into the believer. Not breathing into Mary actually, because the masculine is used. But the believer is likened to Mary and Allah breathes into him. Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the founder of the Ahmadiyya movement in Islam, has given an interpretation of this and says, look, I did not put these words in the Quran. Allah put it. He didn't make a mistake and put masculine instead of feminine when he said, I breathe into him, referring to Mary. No. Mary metaphorically stands for the believer. So the believer is metaphorically as a female that receives the divine revelation and becomes pregnant with knowledge. Not pregnant physically, because you're talking about a spiritual existence. So he says, I have become Mary, spiritually, in a metaphorical sense, and Allah has breathed into me, and He has given me wisdom and knowledge, and now I give birth to a Jesus, meaning I now become the Messiah who can carry this message. So it's all a metaphorical and symbolic concept that is there. that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has explained, and there are a few other citation of this verse and this experience, where they said they became also Jesus. Allah breathed into them and they became Jesus. Jalaluddin Rumi is one of those that says that. So the Quran is indicating to us a level that we can reach in which God can breathe into us and we become, as I've read in chapter 7 here, this verse, associates of Ashabul Araf, associates of deep thinking. Araf comes from the word arf, that means knowledge. But not just ordinary knowledge, but knowledge for which you put your mind to. You do intense study and thinking in order to discover the truth. So the Quran says the associates of divine, of us, deep thinking, whenever they speak out to persons whom they identify by their characteristics, so they look at other people and they see the characteristics, they see people. As we look into the world today, we see so much of leaders, military leaders, political leaders, religious leaders. Everyone is coming forward. A leader does not come forward except to say, well, I can do better. I can lead people to a better life. I can give them more opportunities. Political leaders fight elections for that purpose. And they enter into a parliament or in a White House or in a Whitehall or in a House of Representatives or whatever it is, in order to give a policy that, look, we are going to improve the lives of people. But constantly they are renewed, they are replaced because people find that they don't do what they are supposed to do. And some of them says, well, our hands are tied. We are, in a sense, handicapped because we have limited powers. Don't think we can do. We may have power, but we can really do nothing because the real instruments are there in the hands of other people. It's like a person knows to do something, but you don't have the tools. Or the tools belong to someone else. And you have to employ them or get them. And if you don't, or if they are not available, you're unable to achieve what you set out to achieve. So religious leaders, political leaders, military leaders, and all kinds of leaders, union leaders, labor leaders, leaders in chambers of commerce, and people who are in business and so on, they all think they can do better for people. They can be multimillionaires and say, yes, we will give the world a better thing. We are earning a lot of money so that we can give in charity and we can help people, but it never happens. We know all over the world what is happening in the world today. But it is agreed upon, it is a belief and it is an accepted fact by Muslims that Islam and the teachings of the Quran can solve the problems of the world. There's no doubt about it. Why is it not doing so? Why is it that Muslims are unable to use the Quran and the teachings of Islam to bring a better world? Even among Muslims, they read the same book, the same Quran, and they are divided into Sunnis and Shias. They are divided into Wahhabis and Deobandis and Barailis and Ismailis and Zaidis and different countries, Pakistanis and Saudis and Yemenis and Houthis and all Baluchis and all different kinds of people, either by nationality or by ideology or in some way. And they read the same Quran, but they cannot come to an understanding. There are some people who write books and give an idea and say, look, we need some kind of reformation in Islam. And they give ideas. This is what we think we should do. Some of those ideas are influenced by the Western world, but they can't say that. So they try to say, well, the Western world is doing bad, and this is what Islam should be. But they're putting forth more or less the same ideas. Who is to bring about this change? Which Muslim philosopher, which Muslim writer, which Muslim scholar could stand up and say, this is the solution to the world's problem when you interpret the Quran? Nobody can do so except one sent by God, because the Quran is a book of Allah. It's a book given to us by God. And the interpretation of this, as He Himself says, we will guard it, we will protect it. It is only somebody who is sent by Him that can interpret the Quran in the way in which Allah wants, not the way in which I want, not the way in which you want, or some other scholar or some other person, military leader or whatever it is. We have seen the havoc in the world today where some leaders come forth and they interpret simple word as jihad. And they say that means war and we have to fight and kill, and so many people die. We see the purpose of Islam, it seems, is just to find a homeland for Muslims in some part of the world. They have done it in Pakistan, and there is so much of bloodshed even within that country. There is bloodshed in almost every Muslim country, in Syria and Iraq and Iran, in Saudi Arabia and others. People are being killed in Yemen and other places, in Palestine, of course, we know. And Muslims are helpless in a sense in any way possible, either to use peaceful means or to use military means to bring a solution to all of this killing and death in the world. But they have Islam and they have the Quran. So that it is so important for the world to recognize that Allah has sent a person. He has sent a mujaddid. And He has given him instructions and guidance as to the interpretation of the Quran so that we can benefit the world. And why the world is not benefiting is because they don't know what is the benefit of following the Quran. They don't know. They interpret the Quran in certain ways, as I mentioned in a previous sermon, that a word, simple word, daraba in Arabic, that means to strike. They interpret that means to beat women, to beat your wife beating. Misinterpretation of the Quran. Some are coming up and saying, no, it means no, you should calm down, or you should prevent them, or there are different interpretations that you can get. But it certainly doesn't mean to beat women. So what in fact is the benefit of following the Quran? The Quran, in the very first verse of this chapter, second verse, when it says Alif Lam Mim Sword, it says there is no haraj in your when you read and understand the Quran. The word haraj means squeezing of your mind. Your mind becomes narrow. The Quran does not make you narrow-minded. The Quran expands your breast. It makes you a large-hearted person. It makes you a person who is, open to people of all religions, all faiths, all scriptures. It tells us to accept other scriptures, to accept other prophets of God, to accept other people. Yes, they may have differences in belief and differences in approach, but our message is our purpose is to carry the message of Islam and show the benefits of following the Quran. So what are the benefits of following the Quran? This chapter, Al-Araf, which is translated as elevated places, but means not so much physical place, but position. It means people in a high position. People who are a little higher in not only knowledge, but in their behavior, in their spirituality, as in the case of Abu Bakr, who can be a leader for the world because of their personality is so high, so excellent, based upon the knowledge that they have. Because Islam, as you know, focuses and emphasizes knowledge. Iqra bismi rabbikal ladzi khalaq. So the benefit of following the Quran is that it broadens the mind, leading a person to be siddiq, leading a person to be truthful. Siddiq meaning truthfulness in word as well as in action. And so we find that the world today needs to have a broad mind, not narrow mind, that we are just Americans, or we are Canadians, or we are Europeans, or we are Israelis, or we are Saudis, and we are Muslims, or we are Pakistanis, and everyone is being taught in the modern world today to narrow your field, get rid of all the immigrants and all the foreigners, all the weeds in your country, and be a pure nation, as Hitler tried to do in Germany. Get rid of anybody who is not a German, German-born and German. Similarly, that is being done in one of the countries in the Western world today. We don't want anybody who was not born here, whose blood is not from our forefathers, even though they were themselves, their forefathers themselves were immigrants in a foreign land and slaughtered and got rid of the original native inhabitants and put them in reservation. So the purpose of following the Quran and broadening our mind and becoming Siddiq lies upon a very important principle, a principle that was mentioned in the previous chapter, chapter 6 of the Quran, which is a chapter that deals, as agreed upon, with the concept of the unity of Allah, with Tawheed. And it is important for us to understand that the Quran is the only book that really explains the nature of the divine being as one. The unity of God is emphasized, not the separation of God. People find difficulty in understanding how there can be one God but three as well. Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Or how there can be one God but they can also be Ram and Krishna and Shakti and all of these. Now we as Muslims are given knowledge of the Quran that we can interpret these things. And we can show that it is, the facts are there, it is the interpretation which is wrong. That if you speak of a person as the son of God, it doesn't mean that he's a biological son, because Allah is not a biological being. And in fact, the Old Testament speaks of Adam as the son of God, David as the son of God, others are sons of God. It means it has to be interpreted in a metaphorical way. So this particular chapter of the Quran, chapter 7, emphasizes two things so that we can understand the unity of God, not the separation of gods, not several gods, but one God, and all the attributes that people describe as gods in some way. And we perhaps will be mentioning this tomorrow in our talk at Kunjal, where we have an interfaith meeting, and that will be further explained a little. So the Quran explains, but the Quran in this chapter explains two things: revelation and prophethood. That God says, I will guide you, I will talk to you. And he gives examples of the people he has spoken to, the prophets of God, and he has pointed out not only their relevance, how important they are for the improvement of human character. That you have revelation, God speaks to people, and that was the emphasis of Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. Allah has spoken to me. People are ashamed to say today that God has spoken to them, because they said, if you say that, you are a prophet of God. The Quran does not say that. The Quran says we spoke to the mother of Mary, the mother of Moses, the disciples of Jesus. That did not make them prophets, but it made them Siddiq and Siddiqa. It made them truthful people who could stand up now and expound the truth in words as well as in action. And that is how we find that the messages of the Quran are so important for the improvement of human character. And the world needs to be taught this, that you don't just follow a religion or rituals. You must understand what you are following and utilize it to improve yourself, to make yourself a better human being, and encourage others to do so as well. Barakallahu lana wa lakum fil Quran al-Azim. Wa nafa'ana wa iyyakum bil ayati wa zikr al-hakim. Innahu ta'ala jawadun kareem. Malikun barrur raufur rahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah nahmaduhu wa nasta'inuhu wa nastaghfiruhu wa nu'minu bihi wa natawakkalu alayhi wa na'udzu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fala mudilla lahu wa man yudlilhu fala hadiya lahu. Wa nashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lahu wa nashhadu anna Muhammadan 'abduhu wa rasuluhu. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama sallaita ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma barik ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad kama barakta ala Ibrahim wa ala ali Ibrahim innaka Hamidum Majid. Allahumma ansur man nasara deen Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam waj'alna minhum. Allahumma aghzul man khazala deen Muhammadin sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wa la taj'alna minhum. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adli wal ihsani wa ita'i zil qurba wa yanha 'anil fahsha'i wal munkari wal baghi ya'izukum la'allakum tadhakkurun. Uzkurullaha yazkurkum wad'uhu yastajib lakum wa la zikrullahi ala akbar. Allahu Akbar.